I always find that the majority of American English language remakes of foreign subtitled films are fairly redundant, and to be honest, David Fincher's latest film, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, is no exception to this rule. The plot is the same as the original film and the source material, and that is of a disgraced reporter called Mikhail Blomkvist, played by Daniel Craig, who has to enlist the help of a gothic hacker called Lisbeth Salander, this time played by Rooney Mara, to basically help him solve an age-old murder mystery that's been going on for about 4 decades. Now, the plot, as I've said, is exactly the same as the other incarnations of this story, and the only real difference being is that this film is in English. Now, I do tend to give films, even remakes, everything, the benefit of the doubt, and I always give them a chance to kind of surprise me and maybe do something different than either the original film or the original adaptation. And also, that coupled with the fact that David Fincher was directing this really made me hold out hope for this movie, really made me excited to see it, because I love David Fincher, and I've loved almost all of his movies. I wasn't keen on The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, but that's besides the point. I love the vast majority of his movies, and I have to say that this is one of his weakest films. Now, immediately, what I can say about this movie is anybody used to watching David Fincher's movies are probably used to his style, in that they are so meticulously put together that you could pause his films at any point and you will have a painting on the screen. He composes his shots and uses his scores and helps tweak the performances within an inch of their lives, so that his films are so meticulously put together that they are technically perfect. And I always thought that this style will really suit The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, but what really I was taken aback by was just how rough around the edges this film felt. I didn't feel like all the shots were as carefully composed as his others, and some of the editing was a little bit sloppy, so to speak, and not as tight as we used to seeing from editors who work with David Fincher. And whether or not this was intentional, I found it really jarring, and honestly, the original version of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo felt more like a David Fincher film than this one did, as odd as that sounds. And then we have the performances as well. Now, Daniel Craig is probably one of my favourite actors working today. He's fantastic. Obviously, he has done the big blockbusters like James Bond and the other kind of smaller dramas, which I'm really a fan of, like Enduring Love. He's a fantastic actor, and I thought that he will do really well in a role like this. And to be honest, he does. He is really good in this role. He doesn't really do anything differently to the actor who played the original character, but Daniel Craig is fine in this movie. The point of contention for a lot of people will be Rooney Mara in this. Now, I do want to say that I really loved her performance in this. I thought she was fantastic. I thought she was much more feminine and vulnerable than Noomi Rapace, who played Elizabeth in the originals, but I personally prefer Noomi Rapace's version of this character. But Rooney Mara, I respect what she tried to do with it. I respect the fact that she tried to bring this feminine vulnerability to the character, and it did make sense for the character to be this way. You know, she is the tough, hard-as-nails hacker who will punch you in the face as soon as look at you, but she's also quite a vulnerable little child, and I really liked the multi-dimensions of the character. But I do personally prefer Noomi Rapace's performance, and I think that's because I feel she has a greater presence than Rooney Mara, and it's nothing specific you can put your finger on, but I just feel that she was a little more perhaps likeable in the role. It's hard to say, but I don't think Rooney Mara was as good as Noomi Rapace. But by and large, the performances are pretty good. The standout performance of the film is probably Stellan Skarsgård as a member of the family under investigation by Daniel Craig's reporter. And I think that he manages to bring, you know, quite a sinister presence and pathos to the role, and I thought he was kind of out of the background characters, he was the standout. Obviously, everybody's going to look at Rooney Mara in this film, but I think that Stellan Skarsgård shouldn't be overlooked because I thought he was really good. Now, where the film kind of differs from the Swedish original is that this one has a much stronger ending. The ending feels more fleshed out, whereas in the original it kind of felt tacked on at the end, and apparently I've not read the book, but apparently in the book it feels like that as well. I respect the fact they tried to flesh it out and make it feel more organic to the overall story in this one. So I thought the last 20 minutes or so of this movie were a lot stronger than the Swedish original. In fact, the whole second half of this movie really kind of gains momentum and strength as it progresses. And I thought in this regard it is really quite an interesting movie. However, it is essentially completely unnecessary, and all the while I was watching it I couldn't shake the original from my head. And like I said, I always give remakes the benefit of the doubt, and sometimes prefer the remake to the original if it can take what the original did well and build on it and ignore what the original did badly. But this film, to be honest, basically has the same strengths and flaws as the original movie, and for those reasons I do feel it's an unnecessary remake and probably one of David Fincher's weakest movies. I would recommend it for people who have seen the original or read the book. You'll no doubt get something from it if you're a fan of the franchise. That there is stuff there to be enjoyed, but I just don't feel it can really stand up to the original. Now I'm hoping if David Fincher goes on to do the sequels that the sequels will be stronger than the original sequels, because I didn't like the sequels really, the original Swedish version. But I'm hoping that the sequels is where it'll really hit the ground running. I do have to say another criticism of this is that while I did think after seeing the original, is the American remake going to be as brutal in its depiction of violence against women as the original? Because in the first film, it's difficult to watch. Now in this film, it is brutal, but oddly enough, it's Hollywood brutal. And it didn't make me feel uncomfortable the same way that the other version did. So while it does try to keep those elements of brutality and really controversial violence in the movie, and tries not to tone it down, it doesn't pack the same punch as the first version of this screen story. So again, it just doesn't really hold up, but it's an enjoyable enough thriller. If you haven't seen the Swedish version, then you'll probably love this one. If you have, then maybe like me, you may think that it's a bit really unnecessary because it doesn't really do anything different. It's still set in the same place. It's just all the characters speak English instead of Swedish, I think it was, or Danish in the original. So, it's just, I don't get it. I would have rather this film's budget go on an original project, but again, David Fincher is a fantastic director, and while this is one of his weakest films, it is rough around the edges and does feel a bit rushed in production. I would recommend it for people who haven't seen the other versions of this story, because you'll probably get a lot more from it. For people who have, give it a chance. You might find that the more fleshed out, well-rounded ending really does improve the film overall for you. But to be honest, I prefer the first version of this movie. So that is The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.